Learning new words is one of the most exciting parts of mastering a language. Yet, for many learners, remembering them can feel like an uphill battle. We encounter so many words daily, and the challenge is not just understanding their meaning, but actually storing them in a way that makes them easy to recall when we need them. The good news is that remembering new words doesn't have to be forced or stressful. With the right strategies, learning vocabulary can become a natural, even enjoyable, part of your language journey. One of the most effective ways to remember new words is to connect them to personal experiences. When you associate a word with a vivid memory, a specific situation, or an emotion, it becomes easier for your brain to retain it. For example, if you learn the word serene, you might recall a quiet morning by the lake, a moment when everything felt calm and peaceful. This connection creates a mental hook that links the word to something meaningful, making it much easier to recall later. Another natural way to remember words is through context rather than isolated memorization. Seeing or hearing a word in a sentence, in a story, or in a conversation gives it life. Context provides cues about meaning, usage, and tone, helping you understand how the word functions in real life. Instead of memorizing a list of definitions, pay attention to how the word appears in books, podcasts, songs, or conversations. The more exposure you have in authentic contexts, the more natural your recall becomes. Visualization is another powerful tool for remembering vocabulary. When you learn a new word, create a mental image that represents its meaning. The brain tends to remember images more easily than abstract definitions. For instance, if the word is towering, picture a skyscraper reaching into the clouds. By linking language with imagery, you give your brain multiple ways to access the word, strengthening memory retention. Repetition over time is key, but not in a boring, mechanical way. Spaced repetition, revisiting words after a few hours, days, and weeks, allows the brain to consolidate information into long-term memory. You can do this naturally by reading, listening, and speaking regularly, noticing the words you've learned appearing again and reinforcing them through use. The brain loves patterns and reinforcement, so repeated exposure in meaningful contexts is much more effective than rote memorization. Using new words actively in your own speech or writing is crucial. Words become part of your natural vocabulary only when you apply them. Try writing a short story, journaling, or speaking aloud using new words. Even small sentences or casual conversations count. The act of retrieval, calling a word from memory to use it, strengthens neural connections and helps transfer it from passive recognition to active recall. Grouping words by theme or concept can also make remembering them easier. Instead of learning unrelated words, cluster them around topics like food, emotions, travel, or hobbies. When words are linked conceptually, your brain can create networks of meaning, making it easier to recall one word when you think of another. For instance, learning words related to cooking simmer, chop, season, aroma together can enhance retention through association. Engaging multiple senses makes word learning more effective. Listening to the pronunciation, saying the word aloud, writing it down, and visualizing it creates a multisensory experience that reinforces memory. Our brains remember things better when multiple channels are involved. So read, listen, speak, and even act out words if possible. It makes the process dynamic, memorable, and natural. Curiosity and enjoyment play a surprisingly big role in memory. When we are genuinely interested in a word, its meaning, or its usage, we are far more likely to remember it. Approach new vocabulary with curiosity. Explore its etymology, discover how it appears in literature, or notice its presence in movies and songs. When learning feels like exploration rather than obligation, words stick effortlessly. Finally, patience and consistency are essential. Remembering words naturally takes time, and trying to memorize too many at once can lead to overwhelm. Focus on a few words at a time, immerse yourself in contexts where they appear, and practice them gradually. Over time, these words will no longer feel new. They will become part of your internal vocabulary, ready to flow naturally whenever you speak or write. By connecting words to experience, context, imagery, usage, and emotion, and by approaching learning with curiosity and consistency, you can transform the challenge of memorization into a natural and enjoyable process. Words stop feeling like arbitrary strings of letters and become living tools that help you express yourself, understand the world, and connect with others. And as you practice these strategies, remembering new words will no longer feel like a chore. It will feel like a natural extension of your language journey. Learning new words is one of the most thrilling yet challenging aspects of mastering a language, and yet so often we approach vocabulary as a set of lists to be memorized, disconnected from experience. True retention comes not from rote memorization, but from integrating words into meaningful contexts, where they interact with our thoughts, emotions, and daily activities. When we learn in this way, words cease to be abstract concepts and become tools that actively shape how we perceive and describe the world around us. One of the most natural ways to remember new words is to anchor them in your personal experiences. Your brain is far more likely to retain information that has a story, a sensory association, or an emotional tie. For example, learning the word breathtaking becomes much easier if you recall the moment you first saw a sunset that left you speechless or a view from a mountain that literally took your breath away. The word is no longer just letters on a page. It is bound to a vivid memory, and that memory strengthens the neural pathways that make recall effortless. Context is a powerful ally in learning vocabulary. When a word is seen or heard within sentences, stories, or real conversations, it carries more meaning than a simple definition. Encountering the word repeatedly in diverse contexts, through books, movies, podcasts, or dialogues, reinforces understanding and helps you grasp nuances in tone and usage. For instance, the word elated can appear in a novel describing joy after a hard-won victory, or in a casual conversation about winning a small prize. These varied contexts solidify the word in your memory and allow you to use it flexibly. Visualization adds another dimension to memory. Associating words with images, mental movies, or sensory experiences creates multiple pathways for recall. For example, the word cascade might bring to mind a waterfall tumbling down rocks, each drop vividly imagined, creating a mental scene that strengthens retention. Your brain responds well to imagery, and when learning is paired with visualization, words become more than abstract symbols. They become experiences your mind can revisit. Repetition remains crucial, but it is most effective when spaced over time and embedded in meaningful activities rather than mechanical drills. Revisiting words in different situations, noticing them in reading, hearing them in podcasts, or writing sentences with them at intervals strengthens long-term memory. This spaced repetition works because it mirrors how our brains naturally encode information, reinforcing neural connections without forcing effortful memorization. Active use of words transforms them from passive recognition into usable vocabulary. Speaking aloud, journaling, or writing short stories with new words encourages retrieval practice, which is key to memory consolidation. The act of recalling a word from memory, contextualizing it, and using it in communication strengthens the connections between meaning, sound, and spelling. Over time, this active engagement allows words to flow naturally in conversation rather than remaining stuck on flashcards. Thematic grouping of vocabulary aids retention by creating conceptual networks. When you learn words in clusters related to emotions, nature, travel, or daily routines, the connections among them serve as mental scaffolding. Thinking of one word can trigger related words, enhancing recall. For instance, learning whisper, murmur, and hiss together helps your brain categorize these sounds and improves both understanding and usage. Engaging multiple senses simultaneously can accelerate learning. Saying a word aloud, listening to its pronunciation, writing it by hand, and visualizing it engages different parts of the brain, reinforcing retention. Acting out words physically, using gestures to represent meaning, or associating them with sounds or textures further strengthens memory. The more senses involved, the more robust the encoding, making words easier to retrieve later. Curiosity and interest dramatically improve memory. When we are genuinely intrigued by a word, its etymology, or its usage, learning becomes effortless. Explore words in literature, poetry, or songs, noting how they are employed creatively. Approach vocabulary like a treasure hunt, noticing how new words pop up in unexpected contexts. Curiosity transforms learning from obligation to exploration, and the brain naturally retains what captures attention. Patience and consistency are essential. Retaining new words naturally is not instantaneous. Overloading the mind with too many words at once can lead to forgetfulness or discouragement. Focusing on small sets, integrating them into daily life, and revisiting them gradually allows your vocabulary to expand organically. The goal is to internalize words over time, letting them settle into long-term memory at a pace your brain can handle. Exposure to words in multiple forms strengthens retention. Reading a word, hearing it in conversation or media, and writing it yourself ensures that you encounter it through diverse channels. Each exposure reinforces understanding, pronunciation, and usage, allowing the word to become familiar and automatic. Over time, the brain links these experiences, making recall intuitive rather than effortful. Associating new words with emotions enhances memory significantly. Emotional engagement creates strong neural connections, making recall easier. Words tied to feelings, whether excitement, sadness, curiosity, or awe, linger in memory because the brain tags them as meaningful. For example, the word exhilarated is easier to remember if paired with the memory of a thrilling ride or a personal triumph. Emotions give words weight, anchoring them in lived experience. Using words in multiple scenarios improves adaptability. Practicing words in different contexts, such as casual conversations, storytelling, or writing, helps the brain encode flexibility in usage. A word learned in one context may appear differently in another, and exposure to this variety ensures that vocabulary is not rigid but functional and versatile. This natural integration makes words easier to recall and use spontaneously. Learning through storytelling is particularly effective. Embedding words in narratives, either by reading stories or creating your own, provides a rich context that enhances meaning and memory. Stories give words purpose and connection, linking them to characters, actions, and plots. The narrative structure guides the brain to retain both the word and its connotations, making usage more intuitive and memorable. Repetition in a playful or interactive way strengthens retention. Games, word challenges, or quizzes turn practice into fun rather than rote effort. Associating learning with enjoyment not only motivates consistent practice, but also creates positive emotional links to words, reinforcing memory naturally. For example, creating a small personal crossword or matching words to images engages both cognitive and emotional pathways. Association with known words aids memory. Linking a new word to one you already know creates mental connections that facilitate recall. Synonyms, antonyms, or words with similar sounds or roots serve as anchors. For instance, connecting eloquent with words like articulate or persuasive helps the brain cluster meaning and improves the likelihood of recall in relevant situations. Incorporating words into daily routines promotes natural retention. Observing objects, situations, or actions and internally labeling them in English builds practical connections. For example, noticing a gentle breeze while walking or a sparkling river during a trip embeds vocabulary in lived experience. These real-life applications anchor words in memory and make them functional rather than abstract. Engaging in discussions or language exchanges provides dynamic opportunities to use words naturally. Conversing with others requires active recall, spontaneous application, and adaptation to context. Even small conversations where new words are experimented with reinforce retention because the brain consolidates the word through action, social interaction, and meaningful feedback. Writing creatively consolidates vocabulary. Journals, short stories, or reflections allow words to be applied in personalized contexts. Writing requires careful selection, ordering, and construction, which strengthens neural pathways linking word, meaning, and usage. The act of composing your own sentences creates deeper memory traces than passive exposure alone. Learning with multisensory cues is particularly effective for tricky words. Words associated with sights, sounds, tactile sensations, or even smells create a rich network of memory cues. The word aromatic, paired with the smell of fresh coffee, herbs, or flowers becomes unforgettable because multiple senses encode the experience alongside the language. Using humor aids retention. Funny associations, puns, or ridiculous mental images linked to words can make them unforgettable. When the brain attaches amusement or novelty to a word, recall becomes easier because emotional salience enhances memory consolidation. Even imagining absurd scenarios for abstract words can embed them in memory effectively. Songs and rhymes enhance vocabulary naturally. Music and rhythm provide mnemonic structure, making words easier to remember. Lyrics repeated multiple times, with melody and rhythm, create strong neural patterns. Singing along or mentally replaying phrases reinforces pronunciation, meaning, and contextual understanding simultaneously. Exposure to words in different genres, news, literature, blogs, or dialogues creates flexible understanding. Seeing words in multiple formats ensures that their usage is not rigid but adaptable, increasing confidence and fluency. Words learned in variety are easier to recall because the brain has multiple retrieval pathways. Associating words with gestures or physical movement reinforces memory. Acting out verbs, mimicking actions, or creating hand signals for abstract words creates embodied learning, which engages motor memory alongside cognitive memory. This multisensory engagement solidifies retention and can make recall both faster and more intuitive. Curiosity-driven exploration transforms vocabulary learning into a natural habit. Following your interests, whether science, art, cooking, or travel, exposes you to words that are relevant and personally meaningful. Meaningful engagement increases retention because words are tied to topics you care about rather than random lists. Reviewing words through spaced reflection strengthens memory. Instead of cramming, revisit words periodically, recalling their meaning, pronunciation, and usage in different contexts. This spaced repetition ensures that words move from short-term to long-term memory, embedding them naturally over time. Reading aloud reinforces pronunciation, auditory memory, and comprehension simultaneously. When you hear your own voice articulating new words, you create an auditory trace that complements visual and semantic encoding. Reading aloud also strengthens confidence in using the word in conversation. Observing word usage in social media, videos, or conversations exposes you to real-life applications. Seeing words used authentically provides context, reinforces meaning, and demonstrates natural variations. Exposure in multiple situations solidifies understanding and recall. Reflecting on synonyms and antonyms deepens understanding. By exploring a word's relationships with other words, you create semantic networks that enhance memory. Thinking in clusters rather than isolated words helps you navigate vocabulary naturally and fluidly. Keeping a personal vocabulary notebook or digital list can reinforce learning when used actively. Writing sentences, creating examples, or noting contexts for words transforms the list from passive storage into an interactive learning tool. Active engagement ensures retention and flexibility. Regularly revisiting words in conversation helps reinforce their retention. When we actively try to include new vocabulary in discussions, we create repeated neural pathways that strengthen memory. Even small, Casual use of a word in daily interactions, whether with friends, colleagues, or online communities, solidifies its presence in the mind and makes spontaneous recall more likely. Writing stories or reflections using newly learned words transforms passive knowledge into active skill. Each time you craft a sentence with a new word, you engage multiple mental processes: meaning, context, grammar, and emotional tone. This repeated practice ensures that words are not just recognized, but become part of your functional vocabulary. Listening to podcasts, audiobooks, or conversations in English exposes words in dynamic, real-life contexts. Hearing pronunciation, intonation, and contextual usage helps anchor the word in both auditory and semantic memory. Over time, your brain starts recognizing and recalling the word naturally when encountered in similar settings. Engaging with visual media, films, series, or videos adds another layer to word retention. Associating words with characters, scenarios, and visual cues helps embed them in memory. For example, seeing the word astonished applied to a character's reaction in a dramatic scene creates a vivid impression that lasts far longer than a dictionary definition. Practicing recall before checking the meaning enhances memory. Instead of immediately looking up a word you've just read, pause and try to recall its meaning, synonyms, or usage. This retrieval practice strengthens memory pathways, making recall easier in the future. Language games and quizzes make learning enjoyable and memorable. Puzzles, word associations, and interactive exercises engage the brain actively, combining fun with repetition. This playful approach reinforces words without the fatigue associated with rote memorization. Observing subtle differences between similar words deepens understanding and memory. Distinguishing between elated, joyful, and content, for example, creates nuance and comprehension. Understanding these distinctions ensures that you not only remember the word, but can use it precisely in context. Learning words in clusters helps organize vocabulary in your mind. Grouping by theme, function, or emotion allows the brain to form logical connections. This network of associations makes it easier to retrieve words when you need them and strengthens overall vocabulary structure. Associating words with real-life experiences strengthens retention. When you encounter a word in an authentic scenario, like fragrant, while smelling flowers, the multisensory experience creates a stronger memory link than abstract memorization. Reading extensively exposes words repeatedly in various contexts. Frequent exposure across different texts reinforces understanding, helps recognize nuanced usage, and embeds words naturally into long-term memory. Keeping a language journal allows reflection and active engagement. Writing sentences, noting contexts, and recording new words consolidates learning. Reviewing past entries also provides evidence of progress and encourages continued practice. Using words creatively in humor or metaphor aids retention. Linking words to amusing images or scenarios creates emotional hooks, enhancing recall. For example, imagining a cat as mischievous in a funny situation makes the word memorable. Engaging multiple senses reinforces memory. Hearing, speaking, seeing, and even acting out words creates rich encoding pathways. Multisensory engagement helps the brain access words more readily during recall. Discussing words with peers or in online forums allows practical application. Conversations reinforce meaning, pronunciation, and context. Peer interaction also provides feedback, which strengthens understanding. Exploring etymology deepens memory. Knowing the origin of a word links it to other familiar terms, forming mental connections. This historical or linguistic context provides additional retrieval cues. Using technology wisely enhances learning. Vocabulary apps, spaced repetition software, or digital flashcards provide structured exposure while allowing self-paced practice. Combining digital tools with real-life usage ensures balanced retention. Visualization strengthens memory by linking words to mental images. Creating vivid, dynamic pictures for abstract terms makes them easier to recall. Associating radiant with a bright sunbeam, for example, embeds the word in visual memory. Repetition should be meaningful, not mechanical. Revisiting words in real contexts, reading, speaking, writing, reinforces understanding while keeping learning enjoyable. Meaningful repetition solidifies memory more effectively than rote drills. Categorizing words by part of speech aids recall. Knowing a word is a verb, noun, or adjective helps anticipate its usage in sentences. This structural awareness provides cues that support long-term memory. Exploring cultural context enriches vocabulary learning. Words tied to traditions, idioms, or expressions carry deeper meaning, making them more memorable. Understanding how a word is used culturally reinforces comprehension and recall. Self-testing strengthens neural pathways. Quizzing yourself on meanings, synonyms, or example sentences requires active retrieval, enhancing long-term retention. Self-assessment also highlights gaps in knowledge for targeted practice. Using words in multiple modalities, writing, speaking, reading, listening, reinforces memory. The more pathways through which you interact with a word, the stronger the retention and the easier the recall. Engaging with native speakers provides authentic context. Hearing and using words in natural conversation ensures practical application and retention. Native interactions also reveal subtle nuances and variations in usage. Reflecting on personal reactions to words enhances memory. Considering how a word makes you feel, where it appears in life, or how it resonates with your experiences creates emotional hooks that reinforce recall. Finally, consistency is key. Regular, daily exposure and practice through reading, speaking, writing, or listening ensures that words move from short-term awareness into long-term memory. Consistent practice transforms learning into habit, making new vocabulary a natural part of your expression. Immersing yourself in meaningful contexts is one of the most powerful ways to make new words stick. When you encounter a word repeatedly in situations that matter to you, through stories, conversations, media, or real-life experiences, it becomes anchored in your memory. The brain naturally prioritizes information tied to relevance, emotion, or purpose, so the more a word is associated with something personally significant, the stronger its retention. For instance, if you're learning the word serendipity, reading a story about an unexpected pleasant discovery, hearing it used in a movie scene, and then reflecting on a personal experience of a lucky coincidence links the word to multiple dimensions of memory, narrative, auditory, and emotional. This interconnectedness ensures that the word is not merely recognized in isolation, but becomes a living part of your mental vocabulary, accessible whenever needed. Exploring words through creativity amplifies retention and deepens understanding. Writing, storytelling, or even crafting metaphors around a new word encourages the brain to form rich, multi-layered connections. When you invent sentences, imagine scenarios, or create vivid mental images using the word, you engage multiple cognitive and emotional pathways. For example, taking the word luminous and visualizing a glowing lantern in a dark forest, then writing a short story about its journey, turns the word from a dictionary entry into a rich, embodied experience. The act of creating, imagining, and contextualizing transforms passive knowledge into active mastery, making recall seamless and natural. Repetition intertwined with reflection is a cornerstone of natural vocabulary learning. Simply seeing a word multiple times is not enough. Reflection on its meaning, usage, and connotations deepens neural connections. Revisiting a word at intervals, days, weeks, or even months later, reinforces its place in long-term memory. The reflective process allows you to notice subtleties, such as nuances in tone, collocations, or cultural usage, which further enriches understanding. For instance, revisiting the word melancholy across various contexts, a song lyric, a poem, a conversation, helps capture its emotional depth, ensuring that the word is stored in memory not as a flat definition, but as a dynamic, living concept. Engaging multiple senses simultaneously is another highly effective strategy. Speaking a word aloud, hearing it in conversation, writing it down, and visualizing its meaning creates a rich sensory network in the brain. This multisensory engagement strengthens memory by providing multiple retrieval cues. For example, learning crystalline could involve visualizing sparkling ice, saying the word while tracing its letters on paper, listening to it in a podcast, and using it in a sentence aloud. Each sensory interaction reinforces understanding and recall, making the word more vivid, natural, and readily retrievable when speaking, writing, or reading. Finally, integrating curiosity, patience, and play into vocabulary learning transforms it from a task into an enjoyable, sustainable habit. Words are remembered most naturally when learning is intrinsically motivated, when it's tied to interests, personal experiences, or creative exploration. Curiosity prompts deeper engagement, patience allows for gradual assimilation, and playful experimentation. Through games, storytelling, or humor, anchors words in memory with emotional resonance. Over time, these approaches foster a vocabulary that feels organic, intuitive, and flexible. Each word becomes more than a linguistic unit. It becomes a tool for expression, connection, and understanding embedded in your mind in a way that feels effortless, natural, and enduring. Remember, the key to learning words naturally is integration rather than isolation. By noticing words in context, associating them with experiences, Using them actively and revisiting them over time, you create a vocabulary that feels alive, flexible, and personal. Each word you master becomes a small victory, a bridge to richer expression, and a step toward greater confidence in English. Embrace curiosity, practice patience, and allow your brain to absorb language in ways that are intuitive and enjoyable, and you'll find that remembering new words becomes not only easier but genuinely delightful.